I'm Katie Sewell, and this is A Bittersweet Moment with Tiffany Parks.
Hello and welcome to The Bittersweet Life. I'm Tiffany Parks, and this is your midweek Bittersweet Moment. If it sounds a little bit different from the usual mini episodes that I've been putting up here lately, it's because instead of recording in my apartment, in a room that is not too echoey and that is completely closed off and quiet, today I am recording in a Roman piazza at about 9 o'clock in the morning. It's not terribly busy because it's relatively early, but it's busy enough that I'm sure you can hear not only the traffic going down the side streets, the people chattering in the piazza, the garbage men yelling to each other, and the beeping of their trucks as they back up, and some birds squabbling, as well as many other sounds that I'm sure Katie is picking up on that I don't even notice. But needless to say, this week in Italy, we celebrated the Festa della Repubblica, Republic Day in Italy, which is on June 2nd, which was Monday of this week. And of course, next month, around the same time, the 4th of July, of course, most people know, even non-Americans know that on the 4th of July, America celebrates a similar patriotic national holiday, Independence Day. So I thought I'd look at these two different national holidays and compare and contrast them, because they are kind of, when Italians ask me what 4th of July is all about, I say, think of it as our 2 Giugno, our Festa della Repubblica. But of course, there are big differences, not only because they happen centuries apart. Of course, we all know that American independence was declared in the late 18th century, and in Italy, it happened much later. Now, like I said, it's not the same exact thing, because Italy's Republic Day is not about independence. Italy already had its independence from any other foreign country in 1861. Strangely enough, that date, which I believe, I don't even know what date that is, the date of the Italian Risorgimento, the reunification of Italy, I believe was March 27th, 1861. But don't quote me on that, because I actually don't really know. And it's not even a national holiday, the reunification of Italy. When all the different territories and city-states and small kingdoms and principalities of Italy united to make one unified country, that date is actually not a public holiday. But the Republic Day is. That is the date in which Italy became a republic. It was no longer a sovereign kingdom. When Italy was first reunited, that's a better word probably. When Italy was first reunited, it was under King Victor Emmanuel II. And so Italy was a kingdom, in fact, for the first 50-odd years of its existence, a little more than that. And it was in 1946, shortly after the end of World War II, that Italy had a referendum to see what the people wanted. Did the people want to continue with a kingdom, or did they want a different form of government? Which, I don't know enough about world history to know how common such a referendum might be, but I think it's pretty unusual that you have a country that is ruled by a king, and instead of being overthrown in a violent revolution, which is often how a lot of monarchies end, instead there was a peaceful and democratic referendum. So even before Italy was a democratic country, they had this very democratic vote, which I think is interesting. I think it's unusual. And, who knows? Maybe that's just one of the ways that Italy was drawing from its ancient past, because ancient Rome was first a kingdom, and then eventually it became a democratic state. It became a republic before becoming an empire. But without going into ancient history, Italians voted on June 2nd in 1946 to become a republic. And actually 89% of eligible voters voted to become a republic. I mean, that is, I don't know if any vote in modern history has been so clear on one side. I think about Brexit and how close Brexit was. There were also referendums in Canada shortly before I moved to Montreal about whether Quebec wanted to break off from the rest of Canada. And both of those votes were extremely close. I think the Canadian vote was something like 49.9% to 50.1%. So very, very close votes. And this instead was a landslide. Another interesting tidbit is that women in Italy only gained the right to vote in 1945, the year before. And I like to think probably that female vote had a lot to do with it, had a lot to do with making it such a huge victory on the side of democracy. But anyways, how is it celebrated in Italy? We don't do fireworks on Republic Day. We don't even really do barbecues, although certainly people do take, a long weekend a lot of the time, especially if the date falls on a Tuesday or a Thursday. They'll take that Monday or Friday off to have a nice long weekend, and it's the beginning of summer. People go on trips, but it's not really a barbecue holiday. Like, I feel like the 4th of July is really a barbecue holiday. But what instead people do is they come to the center of Rome, at least. Okay, now I'm not going to talk about the rest of Italy because I only have lived in Rome, but they come to the center of Rome, right around Piazza Venezia, the Victor Emmanuel building, sort of the center of the center of the center of modern Rome. And there is an enormous military parade there. And I'm not a huge military parade person. I'm fine to usually skip those kinds of things, but I did want to go once in my life. And so Claudio and Aurelio and I went in 2019. We decided that we would make the effort to go, especially for Aurelio, who is at that age very into military and soldiers and guns and tanks. He was just absolutely crazy about all of that stuff. And so we took him for that reason. And I got to say, it was impressive. It was a pretty big deal. It was so crowded. It was miserable in that respect. And definitely hard to organize if you are in Rome on the Festa della Repubblica. Plan ahead, get there early, and be prepared to be standing up for hours and hours and hours. But nevertheless, it was definitely interesting to see all these different types of military troops, many different kinds. Some people had this full camouflage on with like rope and seaweed all over them. There were old-fashioned fire trucks from like the 1920s, maybe even earlier. There were all sorts of different individual troops, and it was all really interesting. I have to say, even as someone who's not that into military stuff, I found it interesting. And then, of course, the biggest event of the Festa della Repubblica, of course, is the flyover by the Frecce Tricolori, which is the Italian Aeronautical Division, the acrobatic pilots. And they fly over the city. They have red, white, and green smoke trailing from their engines. And it's pretty cool. It's another thing that you got to see once in your life. Now, they do fly over the city at other times in other cities in Italy for big events, but it's so often you don't know when it's going to happen. And by the time you notice, you hear the roaring of the engines, you look to the sky, by the time you see them, they've already gone. That's generally my experience of it. So it's nice to know if you go to Piazza Venezia on June 2nd, you are going to definitely see it. So that's how we celebrate the Festa della Repubblica in Rome. I hope everyone in Italy enjoyed their holiday, and I hope everyone in the States will enjoy their 4th of July holiday coming up and have an amazing summer all around. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.
Katie popping in real quick to take you on a little journey for a moment. Back to when Tiffany and I were exploring the streets of Rome. Take a listen.
Coincidentally, as luck would have it, we have one of Rome's very best cafes just around the corner. So let's see if it's open.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Cafe Sant'Eustachio in the piazza of the same name. And of course, there's going to be some like super niche coffee snobs who are going to have their own particular favorite. But I would say the majority of Romans consider either this cafe or Tazza d'Oro to be the best coffee in Rome. I do think the smell of this place is amazing. And when you walk inside, if you like the smell of coffee, it's pretty incredible. Now, you can see everybody's standing up at the counter. I mean, there are some tables outside for the tourists, but the Italians who come here, a lot of business people come here during the day on their coffee break. The parliament is just around the corner, so sometimes you'll see some famous Italian politicians in here. They always stand up at the bar to get their coffee. And as you can see, it's packed. Like, you can't really, it's hard to get up to the front of the line. You have to elbow your way up there. But despite its fame, the coffee is very well priced. An espresso is around €1, so they have not taken advantage of their fame. Pay for what you want and then take your receipt up to the bar. And I mean, obviously don't push in front of people. You wait your turn, but people in Italy don't really make organized lines. So you just kind of look around you, see who is there before you, and when you feel like those people have been served, you put your arm forward and you get your coffee.
If I want to be legit, do I have to stand at the bar?
No, sometimes you want to sit down and have your coffee. There's nothing wrong with that. I prefer that. I mean, I'm a tea drinker, so of course I prefer sitting down. Worse than having a pot of tea standing up at the bar of a cafe. It's like, it's the worst. You know, you don't drink tea quickly. Tea is it's a total nightmare. So I usually just get water these days.
The one way you are at odds with this country. Well, let's move on to a place where you're not at odds, a place that is extremely beautiful. And another
We have had so much fun exploring this historic city. So many wonderful stories, so many beautiful and thrilling sights to see. And we've made so many discoveries together. Now imagine being on the streets of Rome with us, making those discoveries for yourself, as we show you some of Rome's most delightful secrets. You see them with your own eyes. You smell the smells. We're leading a week in Rome this October, 2025, from the 5th to the 11th, a small group of adventurous and curious listeners. And you could be one of them. Find out more information at thebittersweetlife.net or email us for the details at bittersweetlifepodcast@gmail.com. Now, back to the show.